Good evening. I want to call to order the Wednesday, March 7, 2018 Elyria School Board meeting. Madam Treasurer, if you can call the roll.
Mr. Bax?
Here.
Mr. Brubaker?
Here.
Ms. Karstafen? Here. Mr. Ellis?
Here.
And Mr. Gebhardt?
Here. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Introductions for this evening. To my far right is Board Member Jim Bax. To my direct right is Board Member Greg Elliott. I'm Kevin Brubaker. To my left is Vice President Annie Karstafen. To her left is Senior Board Member Mike Gebhardt. I had to throw that in there tonight. Dr. Jama is out of town this evening. And our award-winning treasurer, Roy Clickett.
Very good.
I practiced that all week, Joe. All right. Any board recognition this evening? Seeing as none. Any presentations? None. We have no visitor comments this evening, so we'll move right on down the agenda. Board member discussion items. Sure.
Okay. I just have one. I want to give you an announcement. This is an announcement for a get-together. Get in the game. This is going to be April the 29th from 1 o'clock to 4 p.m. And we want you to join this team. Join Team Bubba. It's a spaghetti dinner, and it's going to be at St. Francis, 2143 on Homewood Drive in Lorraine. And it's a benefit for Todd Engel. And it's a beloved teacher, friend, and coach. The tickets are only $10, and we want you to help us. He is fighting to win a battle with cancer. So he's a teacher at Amherst District. So if you will, take a flyer, but please, he will assist us. If you need more information, you can contact Craig Snodgrass. Phone number is 960-0229, and I'll have that information if you need it. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. Bax?
Yeah, I wanted to make people aware, and we've been publicizing it through the high school, that the Elyria Rotary Club for 2018 is offering $50,000 in scholarships. One scholarship is a $20,000 four-year scholarship. It'd be $5,000 per year for 4 years. And we've had several Elyria High grads win that. So that's a cool one. Plus there's an additional $30,000 this year, which will be a number of one-time awards. And so Michelle Kirsch at the high school has the applications. The applications are also online at elyriarotary.org, or you could see me and I could get the forms for you. But yeah, they're great, and it would be super if we would win some. Now that does cover not only Elyria High, but Elyria Catholic, Midview, let's see, Open Door, and one more.
Christian. First Baptist?
First Baptist Christian School. But in any event, there's a number of scholarships, so if you know somebody that hasn't applied, I'd certainly encourage them to do so.
Anybody else? We'd like to announce we have 4 students here. I know they did not sign up to speak tonight. I know I talked to a couple of the gentlemen before the ladies came in. I know there's an event next Wednesday, and I didn't know if one of the students or Mr. Brown wanted to speak to that, because I know the students, I know Mr. Jones personally, so I know he's involved with that. But I hate to put anybody on the spot, but I don't want them to go unrecognized either.
No, if you guys would like to hear things,
please.
We'd be glad to share. You want me to come up to a microphone?
Sure.
You probably recall a couple weeks ago, there were some things out on social media that a couple weeks ago there was a request on social media for students to take a walk out. And on that day it was a little unorganized, there wasn't really any direction. It was a cold, rainy day. So we encouraged kids to stay in, but let them know there would be a floor that they could
There you go.
There, that sounds a little
There
better.
you go. Thank you.
Do you want me to start over?
Sorry, yeah, please, please.
So a couple weeks ago, you probably noticed on social media there were a couple events being talked about, and we actually had kids inform the school that there was supposed to be a walkout, and it didn't give any specifics what you were supposed to do, what it was about. It just gave a time. And we made a school-wide announcement discouraging that, in part because there was no direction and it was pouring down rain. And the kids heard that and they stayed inside. But we also gave the caveat that if they wanted to have those conversations and talk about the things they were thinking about, feeling, that we would be glad to do that as a school. So the individuals you see here are 4 students that we've probably met 4 or 5 times now. Just listening to their ideas, hearing the things they want to do. There are still 2 national days, I guess you'd say, that students are planning things, one being next Wednesday, March 14th, and the students of Elyria have decided they would like to show some support more for the victims of Parkland, Florida, and that's supposed to take place at 10 o'clock. So it was really listening to their ideas, making sure we could keep them safe as they express their feelings. So I don't know if you have questions specifically for them.
What students do we have here this evening?
I'm Ryan Streeter. I'm a 15-year-old sophomore.
I'm Randall Jones. I'm a graduating junior this year.
I'm Sam Trambush, and I'm a senior.
I'm Allison Graney, and I'm a senior.
Any questions from the board?
You're all wearing your lanyards in school?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and thank you to the students.
Yes.
And we look
Thanks, guys.
forward to supporting you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Way to go.
Any other board member discussion?
Just like to say congratulations to the Vipers. Murray Ridge, I think they're going to state, or they're at state. They're in the Final Four, I think.
Okay, very good. Moving on, meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the Board of Education record of proceedings for the February 21st, 2018 meeting is disclosed in enclosure F1.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bax, second by Mr. Verstappen. Any discussion?
Mr. Ehrlich.
Mr. Ehrlich?
That's okay.
If none, Madam Treasurer?
Mr. Ehrlich?
Aye.
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
And Mr. Brubaker?
Aye, motion carried. Treasurer action items.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I have are the donations. I'm asking to acknowledge, express appreciation, and accept the donations as listed in your agenda.
That being said, a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gebhardt. Have a second?
Aye. Second.
Second by Mr. Ehrlich. Any discussion? Madam Treasurer?
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Aye.
Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Ms. Karstafen?
Aye.
And Mr. Brubaker?
Aye, motion carried. Ms. Klinginger, any other treasurer report?
No,
OFC, OSV, FC?
not this evening.
Not this evening. I know Mr. Rigda's here or anything. Mr. Rigda? On the complex? Okay. Superintendent action items. Who is taking that bull?
I can read through those.
Okay.
Number 1, the job description. To approve the job description of the Safety and Security Coordinator as detailed in enclosure K1. Number 2, to approve the revised administrative schedule as detailed in enclosure K2.
Those 2 items, I entertain a motion to approve for discussion purposes.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Bax. Do I have a second?
Is this a motion for discussion purposes? Correct. A second.
Second by Mr. Ehrlich. Any discussion on either item 1 or 2?
Well, I guess I'll start. I'm glad to see that that Dr. Jama is looking out for the best interests of our students. Obviously, with everything that's going on, this is an area that we have to be very concerned about. I'd like to, for the board at this time, to consider maybe looking at a more comprehensive, all-encompassing plan to maybe hire a consulting firm that would be able to come in and review the district, top to bottom, review the current schools, review the new schools, review not everything, hardware, software, layout, education of staff, positions needed. I'm not really sure at this time that I think maybe one new position is what we're looking for. I think it may be bigger than that. Just kind of my thoughts on it. I think down the road this may be a position we might need, but I'm not so sure that we have the proper people recommending what we do at this time.
I would agree with that. I think this is our chance. We've got all brand new schools, or we're going to have brand new schools, and I think we should go a little bit deeper. I think a consultant is a good idea.
I would, considering it, I think right now as I look at how we're currently operating, I'm pleased with that. I would like, but I know that the responsibilities are spread amongst a number of people. And so from that regard, I'm wondering if we're as coordinated as we should be. So yes, I too would be in favor of, if we got to the point of discussing some overview or some, how should I say it, an examination of our current situation by someone skilled in this type of, or someone that specializes in these safety and security measures. I would also be very interested in that.
And also, too, our current structure and I think our future structure, too.
Oh, yeah.
With the master plan, I think it's imperative that this be included. It's interesting that we have Mr. Rigda here today. Paul, can you speak on what is included with the review of security with the master plan, or?
Sure. From here, or do you want to?
Oh, either way.
Turn your mic off. Okay.
It might be.
I think it's on. Yeah.
This this topic is in front of everybody today and 10 years ago, and looking to the future, and it's a current topic of discussion. So it comes up quite a bit during our discussions in terms of not personnel. That would be a non-construction kind of item. The kind of thing that you're proposing would be in concert with what's being provided to the district in terms of safety and security. There are a number of options available in terms of limited access to the building. Obviously, we've got a lot of technology inside of the new schools, like we do in the new Elyria High School. We don't like to talk a lot about where those cameras are and what it is that we can see and how it is that we can monitor it. But I can say this, that as good and great as the system is at Elyria High School, this is 10 years later, and the technology is just on a whole nother level. So there's communications that are possible between the individuals working in the building. We already have those kinds of things, the typical kinds of transmission that you would use on a two-way radio. There's the cameras, the recording. There's doors that can lock automatically. There are doors that can open and close from remote locations. There's a sense of location of where the administrative offices are to be placed, so that they're in the kinds of areas where they can see and hear what's going on. There's limited access into the building initially, not unlike, again, the high school, where you have to come into a self-contained lobby kind of area before you can enter into the office area. All of those things are present in the new system. there is some talk, and Brian would have to talk about that in terms of emergency communications that are fairly automatic with the police. There's been a lot of work that's happened in that area where they're in the communication with the school almost immediately, and there is some talk, I don't know where it is and in what stage it's in, where the police can actually get involved in the monitoring like we would be able to do, to be able to see on screen multiple cameras simultaneously. In terms of personnel, like what you were just talking about, that would enhance tremendously whatever would be inside. There's a sense of not only what mechanically you can do and the use of technology, but how are the people going to react. Oftentimes the injuries that occurred even during drills are due to some form of panic or not understanding what to do and when to do it. Unfortunately, we learn from other tragedies in terms of are the police going to come in and surround the building, or are the police going to go in and try to stop what's going on? I think there's no national plan on that level, but there's a local plan. I know that the police chief and the building principals, the current administration that's coordinating with safe schools, the filing of safe school plans with the state of Ohio, there's a lot of discussion, tabletop kinds of discussion on how to handle those crises, and that would move forward into the new buildings.
Mm-hmm. So within the current master plan team now, mm-hmm. Do you feel comfortable that we have security, safety experts involved with this process?
It's my understanding that a small group has already begun to meet about the safety and security. I'd have to defer to the curriculum department and the pupil services department. Yes. They're doing a lot of nodding. So I have not been in on those meetings because it's not a construction issue, but it is a complementary issue where teachers and administrators and both building level administrators and central office administrators are having dialogue about what will this look like? How safe will we be? There's another safety factor that we always, because it's on our mind right now in terms of shooters, but there's another factor in terms of safety that became law in November of 2017. And fortunately or unfortunately, the law got passed after we passed our bond issue. And that was, and I see they're using the term hardened quite a lot now, to harden the school for weather, not just attacks. And that we are now compelled, obligated, 5 square feet. It's not too much space. If you've been at a concert, you don't even get that much. But 5 square feet per person in the building have to be dedicated to have the walls hardened enough to withstand hurricane force winds. And we have to pay 1/3 of that. The state is paying 2/3 of that. Right. The glass in the buildings have to withstand the force of the equivalent of a 2x4 traveling at 250 miles an hour, having a direct impact on that glass. So even though that's weather hardening in one section of the school, that will also be an area in the school where, as we know in Florida, they ran outside. I often wondered about that scenario. Getting the kids outside rather than inside. This is a safety zone that would be a safety zone not only for the weather, but it would be very safe in terms of intrusion. There's also doors within the school that close, and again, those are more for fire, but they're controlled by electronics. So all of this ties together to make the schools as safe as possible, either for weather, fire, smoke, attacks, and whatever. It's all in that master plan.
So we can do, I guess one thing is you think about the technology.
Yes.
We can do all sorts of things technological with equipment and cameras and everything else. You know, one of the other aspects that, you know, I think about is, you know, and I can't remember who said something, maybe it was Tim. How many entrances are there at Elyria High?
Roughly 25.
So we got 25 entrances, and they're all locked, except you can open them from the inside.
Right.
And so there's no, we could set off alarms and everything else, but once that breach has been opened, it doesn't take very long for something bad to happen. And so not only is it a technical issue, it's a matter of instruction and education with the residents of that building. Not only the teachers, the students as well.
Yes.
That is, you don't open the door and let anybody in that's not supposed to be there. I mean, this is, you know, and I don't think, I'll bet there's not one person here that hasn't done it one time in their life.
Right. No.
And so that, you know, and that's a piece of it that no matter what we do from a technical standpoint, you know, it's very, very hard to guarantee anything. But, you know, it's really important that as a group of people, that every person resident in that building knows their responsibilities with regard to that. And, you know, and that's, you know, and we're going to have some beautiful buildings, and they're going to be very secure from the outside, and you won't be able to get in, but you can't lock the door down and still have people get out in case there's a fire. You know, and so that's another piece of this that I think about in terms of what we would do from an overall security standpoint, is that the people involved are just as critical to this as anything we can do from a concrete and steel situation. And so, you know, and as I consider that, I consider that part of this discussion in terms of what are we going to bring to the table in that regard, you know, and so.
The human factor is huge.
Yeah, and it
is how are we going to react when these issues arise, even though we've been trained. You hear it time and again from the people who go through that for a second or two because they do practice, but they don't practice as many times, and I've heard this time and again. There haven't been any fires that I know of on a major scale in the country, but the law says you have to have one of these practices every single month. And we have to address that practicing factor every day. I don't know if the students are still here behind me, but I used to, as a principal, say to kids time and time again, don't put a pencil in the door. You're running out to the car, you leave it ajar. Our custodians are taking barrels to the trash. They try to prop a door open. All of those are breaches in security, and I don't think as a teacher or a student or one of our maintenance workers on a day-to-day basis think of that.
Sure.
Because maybe they shouldn't have to be so vigilant, but it's that vigilance and that's that sense of following the plan, and whatever plan you have in place, and no matter how many tens of thousands of dollars of technology you've put in there, if they don't act accordingly, all that technology will do is record the problem. Right. After it'll help you in the post-analysis of what went wrong if you're not careful.
You know, I think the young people that we have here, and thank you for coming in, by the way, understand precisely what we're talking about. You know, now if you talk about someone that's in the first grade, that's not necessarily understanding. That becomes fear. And, you know, so if we'd say, well, let's have a drill every 2 weeks on this.
No.
You know, and you don't want kids to be afraid. They don't learn very well in that environment, first of all. But, you know, and so where do you draw the line on this? And so, you know, to say that everybody has, you know, somebody's got all the answers, I don't believe so.
Right.
But I think, you know, I think that we want to do what's prudent. And if we do everything right, nothing's going to happen.
There's no guarantee. I think you mentioned that earlier. There's never any guarantee. You do the best you can in the preparation. It has to be age-appropriate training, and your experts would know that.
So, Paul, on your part with the master plan, on your next update, could you please address currently the safety and the security element of the master plan?
Sure.
Working with the state, with our current team.
Okay.
Kind of give us an idea of that, because this is a very serious issue that we're going to have to look at, and whether it's hiring a person or doing a more comprehensive plan, Obviously, we want to make sure that student safety is first and foremost.
Okay, sure. All right.
The room you were talking about, is that just one room?
It's an area.
It's an area.
The best way to describe it would be it's a space, a large space.
But that's more for weather.
The intent, the law was passed for weather. But I noticed that the people who talk about these things use the same word, and that's hardened. They want to harden the school. Now, what does that mean? Concrete block, as you see behind you, is empty in the center. They'll put rebar through those walls, down through there, and they'll pour concrete in there. I'm looking at the engineer, right? They're going to put more steel at the top, and the roofs won't blow off. Now, at the same time, that becomes a very safe, non-penetrable area for anything that's trying to get in.
But with weather, usually you have a few minutes.
Oh, my God.
Okay. Well, we all know how we'll react when the explosion happens.
I get ready to get on the floor.
Was that simulation planned or
How did you plan? Did you plan that?
Well, I bet you I surprised you, huh? Wow. I have no idea. I didn't touch a thing. I didn't touch anything.
Did you have anything else, Mike?
Well, like I said, the weather, that's, never mind, I forgot.
The law was the weather. The law was harden the area 5 square feet per person in an area that kids can get to in a very short time, either through a signal system in the building or by some kind of announcement. It has to be.
A few minutes or to get someplace.
Theoretically, yes.
You have somebody in the building, it's a little bit different.
That's correct. Yeah. You never, on those things, it depends on where they are and what they're doing. And they now do practice a number of, that whole hiding thing is kind of old school now. You hide when you can't get out. You get out if you can get out. You run when you can run. Some of the windows, of course, open, and in many modern buildings, windows don't open. You're right about the doors. For fire department will not allow us to even put a lock on the classroom doors. I was surprised to read in Florida, that school, those teachers could lock themselves in the room. Our current arrangement with safety forces is not to permit us to lock the doors with kids inside. They want to get inside if they need to attend. When people are inside and they can't see outside, they think the person on the other side of the door may be lying. How do they know? I think we've heard those stories as well. Sandy Hook, the teacher would not allow those kids to come out of the closet even though the police were outside. They had to pass things under the door to let them know that it was safe and secure. So everybody's going to handle these situations the best they can, and I think training is key, and there are professionals now, unfortunately, that specialize in trying to get us safely back home.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Okay, well, thank you, Paul, too. Also, just to say that we understand that safety is our main priority when it comes to our children. So I would say that I would have to agree with what Greg said and what all of my fellow board members have said, that a thorough comprehensive examination would be in order, and we should look at not just an individual, but rather we should look at the larger picture. So yes, I think that we should, if it calls for a department as opposed to an individual at this time. So we need to take time with this to make sure that we're making the right decision.
And I think our vice president would be a perfect person to lead this for us. Right? Our board rep.
No.
Well, either way, I think it's a wonderful idea to kind of look at the big picture and consider a very comprehensive plan.
Yes, I agree.
I will say that when Dr. Jama brought this idea to me last week to put on the agenda, I supported him 100%. I think this has evolved into a much broader discussion. I still support the idea of this. And I will say this, that I've had extensive conversations individually, Howard, by the way, with each of the board members in regards to the safety of our schools, and they are all in favor of, as they've already elegantly put, proceeding with some idea of this job description or safety security coordinator, but more in a broad discussion. So I think when Dr. Jama comes back, I think we sit down and maybe have a board liaison to meet with the cabinet to kind of move forward with this and come up with a more comprehensive. But I will reiterate what the rest of the board says, that I think our student safety is a huge priority, if not top priority, outside of the education of our students. I think our current staff does an excellent job. I know a lot of it relies on the principals at their individual buildings, and I know it's very difficult to get into some of these buildings, but as you found out in many instances, if someone wants to get into something bad enough, they're going to find a way to get in one way or the other. So with that being said, we need to amend the motion to approve item 2 on the agenda. We'll start with that. So who made the motion? Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Item number 2 only deals with the new position.
Okay, so on items 1 and 2, we can move on. Mr. Lane, do we need to take a vote on this or table it?
There's a pending motion. You can do one of two things. You can withdraw the motion and table the issue for another date, or you can vote.
Okay.
But there's a pending motion right now that either needs to be withdrawn or voted on.
The pending motion was for discussion.
Pardon me?
The pending motion was for discussion.
It still sits.
Okay.
It's a motion.
So who was the proponent of the motion?
Mr. Bax.
Mr. Bax, what is your pleasure?
At this point, then, based on our discussion, I would move to withdraw that.
Okay. Does the second concur?
If it was me, yes, I concur.
It was you.
It was.
Draw the motion off the table, and we will table this until, do we have to do a certain board meeting? No? Okay. We'll table this for further discussion. Moving on, Superintendent Other.
I have nothing under Superintendent Other, but under Personnel Action Items, number 1, to approve the appointment of the following certified staff as detailed below. Number 2, to approve the following game workers as detailed below. Number 3, to approve the appointment of the following classified staff as detailed below. And those are my recommendations. Those
Thank
are the
you.
superintendent's recommendations.
Do I have a motion to approve the personnel items as recommended by the superintendent?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ellick, second by Ms. Karstoffen. Any discussion? Madam Treasurer?
Mr. Ellick?
Aye.
Ms. Karstoffen?
Aye.
Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Mr. Gebhardt? And Mr. Brubaker?
Aye. Motion carried. Other personnel items?
Did we, oh, okay, sorry. Number 1, to approve the unpaid leave of absence of the following certified staff as detailed below. And that is it.
Do I have a motion to approve the personnel items action recommended by the superintendent?
I will make a motion to approve number 2 for this leave of absence for Kara Gebhardt. She's a wonderful woman that takes after her mother.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Mr. Ellick, a second by, are you seconding the comment or the motion?
Oh, please.
We have a second by Mr. Bax. Any discussion? Madam Treasurer?
Mr. Ellick?
Aye.
Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Ms. Karstoffen? Aye. Mr. Gebhardt?
Abstain.
And Mr. Brubaker?
Aye, motion carried. Superintendent Other?
Gary, did you want to introduce any new staff?
Please do.
Nice to see Mr. Taylor here again.
It's always a pleasure to see our board, particularly Mr. Ellick.
We're enjoying the days.
Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
Yes. I'm very pleased. We have 2 of our new staff members. I see one came in here on this kind of dicey weather
Wow.
night. But Sarah Sadler, let's see, Sarah, if you'd stand up. Sarah's going to be joining us as an intervention specialist at Elyria High. due to a retirement that we had on February 1st. So she's actually gone from the classroom just as far back as December at Bowling Green and is now in the classroom.
Oh, great.
Welcome, Sarah.
Welcome, Sarah.
And Mary Hooper. Mary will be joining the pre-K program as an instructional paraprofessional in Franklin School. So, welcome.
Great, welcome.
Okay. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Board of Education, Board of Policy Procedure Regulations, first reading, to approve the first reading of the following board policy, procurement and use of naloxone or Narcan in emergency. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gebhardt. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Second by Ms. Karstoffen. Discussion. Madam Treasurer?
Mr. Gebhardt? Aye. Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Ms. Karstafen? Aye. Mr. Elick?
Aye.
And Mr. Brubaker?
Aye. Motion carried.
I think that's why he was a little bit off.
No, that's not why he was a little bit off.
Okay, sorry.
Got it?
Yep, got it.
All right, request for executive session. We'll need a motion and a second to request an executive session to consider the dismissal of a public employee and to consider confidential information related to negotiations with the political subdivisions respecting a request for economic development assistance. One, the information being directly related to requests for economic development assistance under the Ohio Revised Code 5709.62. And two, the executive session being necessary to protect the interests of the applicant or the possible investment or expenditure of public funds to be made in connection with the economic development project with possible action to follow as authorized under the Ohio Revised Code, ORC, Section 121.22. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Elick, second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gebhardt. Madam Treasurer?
Mr. Elick?
Aye.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Bax?
Yes.
Ms. Karstafen? Aye. And Mr. Brubaker?
Aye, motion carried. We will adjourn to go into executive session with possible action to follow. Thank you, everyone, for coming. To our fine students, continue the good work, and thank you for coming.
Howard, too?